Hey everyone, Warwick's here. So we did a preview of the Retribution Paladin and the rework that it's getting. Basically, it's getting burned to the ground and rebuilt from the foundation up. Prot Paladin is also a spec that's getting sort of soft reworked because of all the changes that are happening to the Paladin class tree. Holy's also getting some changes as well. As a result of some of the Paladin class tree changes. So all three specs of Paladin are kind of getting some updates, some tweaks, and some movements and stuff like that. So I've done a video on Ret, which is a spec that I'll most likely be playing in Raid, at least for the short term. And today I'm going to be looking at Prot, which is a spec I'll be playing a lot in Keys, potentially having to Raid on it if I'm asked to tank next tier. So what I want to do in today's video is do the same that I did in the Ret video, which is kind of go over the changes to the talent tree, why these improvements are being made, or where the improvements are being made rather, and kind of look at some potential options for builds. Now, take all the build stuff kind of at a grain of salt in some ways. There's a lot of tuning that still needs to be done, and I still think there's some iteration that needs to be done, particularly on this side of the tree, the spec tree, to kind of make things a little bit better. But overall, I think that the kind of TLDR of this, that Prot Paladin is going to be in a lot better space come next patch. Is it going to jump up and take over the meta? Probably not, but if the changes go through, I think Prot Paladin is going to be one of the stronger tanks, probably up there with Prot Warrior and Blood DK, potentially Vengeance Demon Hunter. And all of a sudden we'd have like 4 pretty strong specs, with Guardian Druid, the obvious kind of lacking spec, and Brewmaster Monk being a spec that in the right hands is really powerful, but generally I don't think is in the best state for the kind of generic play base. Anyways, let's look at the class tree first, and let's look at some of the changes that have happened. Obviously, Turn Evil has been moved up. In general builds, I don't think you'll see much play. However, it does allow for some different options to get there. Currently on live, we have to take 2 points in Fist of Justice in order to get over to like Greater Judgment, as it is on live. And right now that just feels really bad because in raid situations, you're not using Hammer of Justice very often on a raid fight scenario. So there's just no reason to have the cooldown CDR on Hodge. But obviously you can see in this tree that's been they've been disconnected from each other and opened up. So obviously you start with Lay on Hands and the auras of the Resolutes. You get Devo and Concentration aura. And I think in most kind of general builds, we'll kind of build a generic build. You're obviously going to take Hammer of Wrath, and I think you obviously take Greater Judgment because it just makes your Shield of the Righteous hit harder on those targets. You also take Rebuke, I think, in most all situations, just because it's a generally straightforward point to take. And then you're going to grab Divine Steed, Cavalier, and Seasoned Warhorse, which has been buffed from 1 second to 2 seconds. It actually kind of does make a difference, believe it or not. You're getting that 6 seconds of Divine Steed. It says 5 here, but it's supposed to be 6 now, I think. Let's check. Oh, no, it's only 5. So you go from 3 to 5, which strangely enough makes a big difference. I still want to see a 30-second recharge timer on Divine Steed instead of 45, but we'll have to see. And then you have 2 points left over. Now, normally this is where you take your 2 points in Fist of Justice. For raid situations, I think there's a few different options that you have on the table here. You could obviously grab Blinding Light, which I think is going to be very good. Cleanse Toxins, Poison and Disease effects, I think will be somewhat prominent, at least in the at least in the 4 Shadowlands dungeons. We know that Brackenhide is going to be in the pool next season, which means that obviously poisons are going to be very, very impactful there. Halls of Infusion has some poisons and disease effects in it as well, kind of in the middle of that dungeon. So I think Cleanse is probably going to find its way into some builds next season, just to kind of help out with your healer, especially if you don't run with Preservation Evoker. So I think those would be your 2 points come Mythic Plus. For raid purposes, you're probably grabbing something like Obduracy, which has been moved way up the tree, and Speed and Avoidance increased by 2%, and then you might grab something like Blessing of Freedom. So we're just going to do that for now. If you are running with a Holy Paladin, or as a Swift Vengeance might be a play as well in your raid, because you get Retribution Aura. Or you could even go Crusader Aura and get the extra range on your Rebuke in particular. So I think those are some potential options on the tree. There is one talent here in the second tier now that I think needs to be changed, and that's Punishment. Getting Rebuke, casting an extra Crusader Strike, I think is just fundamentally flawed ideology, I think is the best way to say it. because it basically makes Rebuke a DPS increase when it's supposed to be a utility spell. I think reducing the cooldown of Rebuke by like 3 seconds, which I think is something that the warrior trees have, I think would be much better use of punishment in this case. But for now, as it stands, because you're getting a free Crusader Strike, which you don't even have as a Prot Paladin, because you're taking over with, you know, Blessed Hammer, I think this is kind of a mandatory pick in this tree. Obviously, you're going to take Avenging Wrath. I don't think that's a question. And then you have Holy Aegis giving you more armor and more crit. You know, you take armor and crit as much as you need, plus you need 2 points to fill out the tree. These are just 2 strong points to get. And then you get Judgment's damage increased by 10%. I think it's very good. Then you have on this side Golden Path, still kind of weak. It's kind of one of the better talents that you take right now because there's not much else in the tree that's worth taking. But I think in this new tree, Golden Path probably can be skipped, especially since you don't, you know, Seal of Mercy and Strength of Conviction. You don't even need to get Golden Path, but like Seal of Mercy in particular doesn't really empower Golden Path in any meaningful way. And with After Image here being able to get Strength of Conviction, I think that is something that, you know, allows for this to be opened up a little bit more. And then on this side, Lightforge Blessing is of a Divine Storm, heals nearby allies. You don't have Divine Storm, so I'm wondering if that's a bug. I think this talent is still a bug, and it doesn't appear to be fully implemented yet anyways. And so they need to do something to allow it to proc for Holy and for Prot as well. So I think that's going to happen. But again, it makes these trio of nodes here like feel very, very mandatory, which I don't know if that's something that they want, but I think it's something that is going to happen as long as these nodes stay the way that they are. Which leaves us kind of in the middle. We're getting Bop. You get Sanctified Plates, which gives you a 10% stamina increase, a 20% armor increase, and a 10% area of effect attack reduction. So anything that isn't a direct attack, so think of any swirly type effects, basically are going to be impacted by Sanctified Plates. I think this is a mandatory pick for potentially all Paladin specs, but getting extra stamina is something that the Prot Paladin really values. The armor is kind of whatever overall. Between Holy Aegis and Sanctified Plates, you're getting big increase in your armor, which is going to really help against physical attacks, but obviously does nothing for magic. I do think that, you know, because you have 6 points left here, you take both blessings here, Blessing of Protection and Blessing of Sacrifice. Crusader's Reprieve makes your auto attack range a little bit more, and you get Crusader Strike healing you for 2% of your maximum health. Still to be determined if it covers with like Blessed Hammer or Hammer of the Righteous. If it does, then that's going to be quite a powerful tool for Prot Paladin, so I think you end up taking it. Unbreakable Spirit is just very good. You take it. And then I would think you end up going with something like Recompense or Minute Sack, depending on what you need for the situation. I'll do Recompense because it's generally, I think, better overall. So you can either use it to use on Judgment for damage, or you can use it as on Wog for extra healing, just so that you can guarantee that you could top yourself off or do big damage to a single target. Minute Bop, I think, is going to depend on the fight. Generally speaking, I don't think Minute Bop is all that useful because it's a 4-minute cooldown, so reducing it to 3 minutes doesn't really seem like it's going to be that valuable unless it's on a very specific raid fight situation. And Mythic Plus, I just don't see it really being valuable. But we need some points to get down the tree here. So this is where you come back and you probably grab something like Cleanse Toxins in a raid build, or you'd grab Lightforge Blessing if it is tweaked. You can also grab the auras if you're running with a Prot Paladin and don't have to be the Devo aura. Then grabbing Ret or Crusader aura I think is generally going to be the best utility. All right, and then we get Judgment of Light, which got buffed a little bit to make the next 5 successful attacks heal for more. So instead of 25 attacks healing for very little, it's 5 attacks healing for a slightly more amount. And because you're casting Judgment quite a bit as a Prot Paladin, I think this talent is very valuable for off-healing kind of purposes. Of Dusk and Dawn, if you're not aware, Blessing of Dawn and Blessing of Dusk have been soft reworked. Instead of guaranteeing or trying to mandate a certain number of holy power, you needed 5 holy power to gain Blessing of Dawn, 0 to gain Blessing of Dusk. Instead, they tied it to your generating abilities. So when you use things like Blessed Hammer, Consecration, or excuse me, Blessed Hammer, Judgment, Consecration, if it generates a holy power, but Divine Toll, for example, then you're going to gain Blessing of Dawn, which gives you 30% more increased damage and healing on your Holy Power Spender. Next Holy Power Spender, rather. And then Blessing of Dusk, just when it basically procs after you use a Holy Power Spender. You then get 5% DR, 10% increased armor, and depending on the talent you take below it, a different type of buff. Right now, I think that buff is going to be Seal of Order, which means that you're going to get an additional 10% damage, so 40% on Blessing of Dawn. That's the same for both of these options here. But Blessing of Dusk with Seal of Order makes your generating abilities cool down 10% faster, and you get an additional 10% armor. So I think that's just going to be the best option. Here you get a Holy Power generating ability, grants an absorb shield for 20% of the damage or healing dealt. I just think this is very weak in comparison to Blessing of Dusk, which is going to actually be a DPS increase, whereas this is just a defensive increase. So I think Seal of Order is going to be the pick. They need to do something with Fading Light and the Blessing of Dusk aspect of it in general in order to make it feel like it has value. You still take Divine Protection because anytime you can help you get the free Holy Power spenders, it means more Shield of the Righteous, means more uptime, always really good. And then you grab Divine Toll, and I think you grab Divine Resonance still. Quickened Invocation would be cool to have, but because it's in a choice node with Divine Resonance, which I think is just a better overall ability or talent, I think you're always picking Divine Resonance. And then on this side of the tree, there's some interesting choices. They reworked Seal of Might, so instead it increases your mastery just all the time instead of being specifically inside Avenging Wrath. And then you get Seal of Alacrity, which reduces the judgment cooldown and gives you 4% haste. And then you have something like Faith's Armor, which gives you 20% bonus armor for 4.5 seconds on Shield of the Righteous. This is probably a little bit busted, and again falls into this area where it's probably going to be mandatory. But then you have to give up, because I think you take these buff bonuses, I think they're just too powerful. You know, free 4% haste, free 4% mastery, and 4% strength, which is really the biggest one of all of these. I think it's just really powerful to have at the bottom half of your tree. And then you kind of have your last point here as a flex point. You can go grab Blinding Light if you want to, Cleanse Toxins if you needed to. Golden Path is out there, but again, I don't think it really sees play now with the way this tree has been designed. You can grab Fate's Armor, which gives you bonus armor anytime you use Shield of the Righteous, so it's just even more resistance against physical attacks. So if there's a very heavy physical dungeon, you think of something like, for example, what was the dungeon? There was a dungeon last season that was basically all physical damage, which is why warriors were so good in it for a while. I think it was Iron Docks, I think was the one, where it was just like pretty much all physical damage. And so something like this would be very powerful in a dungeon like that. I still think you end up taking Incandescence just because it gives you the chance to get that extra damage. And it's, 5% per holy power spent. You're always spending 3, so you get that 15% chance to cause your consecration to flare up. And because you're a Prot Paladin, you're always standing inside your consecration. So I think generally speaking, this is something that you'd be looking at from the perspective of kind of a generic build. This is, I think, leans a little bit more towards raid, because in Mythic Plus you obviously want Blinding Light as an extra stop. You trade some points out, and you would move some points around depending on like your group comp in Mythic Plus or even your group comp in raid. Like I said, you don't need a point in Oris's Vengeance if you don't have a Holy Paladin, for example. You are going to have to be the Devo bot. Or if you have a Ret Paladin and a Holy Paladin, then obviously you can run things like Crusader Aura, or you grab Concentration Aura, which is kind of useless overall. It's more a PvP thing. But in which case you then go look at a talent like, do you grab Fist of Justice, or do you grab Golden Path, or do you grab Lightforged Blessing or Fate's Armor? You have some flex points in order to really make this tree work. I think it makes the tree feel a lot better overall, and I think it feels like you're less like cookie cutter in your builds, which is a big thing on live right now. All right, now let's look at the spec tree. Of course, you start off with Avenger's Shield. Holy Shield has been moved as swap places basically with Blessed Hammer and Hammer of the Righteous. It doesn't change the fact you're still going to take both. I think it just makes the pathing feel like it makes a little more sense. I still think you grab Readout over Inner Light. It's just really good. Anytime you can get more strength and stamina, you're going to take it. And then you need, of course, all 3 of these points. Blessed Hammer is still going to be better than Hammer of the Righteous. Hammer of the Righteous is going to have to like hit much harder in order for it to be really taken in any situation. Because right now, basically, like, yeah, it does 7,000 physical damage, and then it also hits everything else, you know, for that. But it basically does 1474 to enemies, all enemies, and then reducing the next physical attack they do to you by 2,000. It's a much better with 3 seconds. Same recharge, but the extra charge on it just makes it a better holy power generator overall. Grand Crusader is your proc, gives you charge adjustment if you run multiple charges, and then of course you get the free Avenger Shield and get the strength increase. Really good, just bonus passive proc that adds some variety to the gameplay. And Shining Light is kind of one of the core mitigation tools that you use, with those free Word of Glories. Now this next row I think has 5 really interesting talents. You get Improved Holy Shield or Sanctuary. Improved Holy Shield I think you only use if the boss is very much just a pure spellcaster, and it's always hitting you. There's very few of those in Raid right now. So I just don't see this talent seeing a bunch of play, particularly when you can just get a flat 5% DR for standing into Consecration, which you should always be doing. Inspiring Vanguard gives you increased Grand Crusader procs and also gives you the strength aspect of it. Of course, you're going to take Ardent Defender, one of your most important cooldowns. You have Barricade of Faith, which gives you 10% block when you Avenger Shield, and then you have Consecration and Flame, which gives you 2 seconds longer and extra damage on your Consecration. All 5 of these talents are really good. Unfortunately, I don't know if you can fit all 5 of them into the build. Generally speaking, I'm going to go with these 3 here to begin with. Sanctuary for defensive purposes, Ardent Defender for defensive purposes, and Consecration lasting longer, which is a little bit more of a defensive boost. Inspiring Vanguard and Barricade of Faith I think are both talents that could potentially see play as we continue down the tree. This opens up this choice note on this side. For every target hit by Avenger Shield, you gain 2% parry, or you just get a 10-second 2% reduction. This can overlap, so if you're getting Grand Crusader procs, for example, you can get up to 6%. I just don't really see this finding a place right now. Both of these talents feel kind of weak. I don't really see them finding a place at all, especially because you're blocking so much damage. Having extra parry, kind of nice, but you're talking Avenger Shield bounces up to 4 enemies, so you're talking maximum 10% parry, which is not a bad thing for 15 seconds, and you can keep this up pretty heavily. It may be worth it if you needed it in like a heavy defensive build for whatever reason. I just don't think for an offensive build you're really going to see it have play. Light of the Titans does have a small change where if you have a harmful periodic effect on you, so a bleed for example, and you cast Word of Glory on yourself, it does, instead of doing like almost 13,000 damage, it's going to do closer to like 20,000 damage over 15 seconds. So it's just a little hot on yourself with your wogs, just a little bit of sustain. I think it has value in the tree, and it's going to be the best path to kind of open up this side of the tree a little bit, which I think does have some potential play in it. So probably end up going to be a pick here. In the middle, you get Blessing of Spell Warding or Improved Ardent Defender. Spell Warding, I think you only take if the encounter or the dungeon calls for it. Improved Ardent Defender gives you 30% DR or 40% DR versus 30% DR. Not really like a talent that feels worth it. And then you get Bulwark of Order, which gives you the Absorb Shield for hitting Avenger Shield. I think this talent, again, feels pretty mandatory. And we're going to go ahead and grab Light of the Titans as well, just because it's a good sustain tool for yourself. And on this side, you get Tyrion's Devotion. I think this is a talent that actually should be pulled out of the prot tree and moved over to the class tree. I think it would add a nice little wrinkle into the class tree itself, because every spec uses Lay on Hands. So having Lay on Hands available more often, because it is, baseline 7-minute cooldown, I think that would make this a much better talent for the class tree versus the spec tree, because Consecrated Ground is just good. All right, and then here, of course, you want to grab Avenging Wrath Might or Sentinel. I've played with both on live. Avenging Wrath Might definitely is more DPS because you get that increased crit, whereas Sentinel does give you a much more defensive way to do Avenging Wrath. It just kind of depends on your situation. I tanked Mythic Taros for the first time, for example, on Prot Paladin, and so I ran Sentinel, but I noticed about halfway through that my damage intake wasn't being spiked, and Sentinel wasn't going to save me in those cases, in which case I just switched over to Avenging Wrath Might just to try and squeeze out a little bit more of that damage. All right, Tyrus Enforcer, I think, is very good in Mythic Plus. May not be super valuable in Raid. It just depends on the fight. Something like Primal Council will be very good. Something like Taros, it will not be very good. Seal of Reprisal may have options for Blessed Hammer, but I don't think there's a point economy for it. Relentless Inquisitor, giving you haste. 3% haste for using finishers, or for spending, rather. I think these is just really valuable, really good talent. Seal of Charity, when you cast Word of Glory on someone other than yourself, you also heal for 50% of the amount healed. This does have interplay with Light of the Titans, where if you heal someone else, they get the Word of Glory and you get the Word of Glory hot, so to speak. So there is some value in this. When you get Faith in the Light, where casting Word of Glory gives you additional 50% block chance for 5 seconds. It's 30% at 2 points. I think this is honestly the best. I know it's 2 points versus this only being 1, but I think this is probably our best pound for pound option here. And then you just go from there. So this is where we have 2 points left to spend. Mythic Plus, I think you just grab Tears Enforcer. It's just too very, very good. In raid situations, I think this is where you can grab something like Inspiring. Oh wait, we got 2 points here. I do think obviously you grab Kings. There's Hand of the Protector, which increases based on the target's missing health, which is always good. Getting 2 charges of Judgment is very good. Bastion of Light is still very good because it's a quick way to build up your Shining Light proc, and it's a good way to get your defenses up very quickly, at least get your mitigation up very quickly. We'll go ahead and grab that. I think Eye of Tyr is good, particularly with Inmost Light actually making Eye of Tyr an offensive and defensive cooldown. I think that's going to be pretty powerful. Sanctified Wrath is going to be obviously your Avenging Wrath, which causes Judgment to do an additional holy power. It basically gates off, potentially gates off if you don't take Uther's Counsel, which I don't see any reason that you would. Resolute Defender, which gives you Ardent Defender cooldown, and then also Righteous Protector, which gives you that big cooldown. I think in raid situations, you're going to want to grab all of these. And then, of course, they changed Focus Enmity a little bit. So this one, I think, actually is something that needs to be addressed right now. So when it only strikes a single enemy, it deals 100% additional holy damage. Right now, basically, it only makes it, like on live, it only hits a single target. So even in situations where you would want, like for example, you want to be able to bounce the shield on like Primal Council. So you take, so either you skip the talents completely or you just take Soaring Shield in order to get to something below it. However, this actually makes it so that on single target fights like Taros or targets with potential add stuff like Kurog, for example, you get a benefit from when you are just fighting Kurog, but when the ads pop up, the additional ads in his intermission phase, for example, you still are being able to have the shield bounce, but you're still getting that single target DPS increase. So I think this is a very good choice node. I think Mythic Plus, raid, I think that's kind of what you're looking at from a build perspective. Gift of the Golden Valkyrie, also a good way, a very strong defensive tool. Also allows you to get to Farron Marcus's Fervor without having to take one of the shield talents. So if you're in a situation where you don't know which one you want to take, or you don't think either one is going to be all that valuable, then you can just kind of skip it. Like I said, like for example, Primal Council, you're going to want something like Tears Enforcer, but neither of these are going to have a lot of value, because bouncing to 6 additional targets versus 4 additional targets literally changes nothing on that fight. Whereas like Focus Enmity, you're never going to be hitting just a single target, so you're never going to take advantage of that damage reduction. So having a new path over here to Farron Marcus's Fervor, so when you say like you're primarily tanking Opal Fang, or Opal Fang is your highest health target, and you need to even out the damage spread, now you could take Gift of the Golden Valkyrie into Farron Marcus's Fervor, and you now can do, okay, Opal Fang is the primary target, I'm doing more damage when I shield him. So I think it just opens up some really good options. But the last 2 points here I think are really, really flexible. Again, I think in Mythic Plus you take Tears Enforcer, you grab things like Bulwark of the Righteous Fury. You could even drop Bastion of Light in order to grab something like Final Stand if you want it. You can go drop Righteous Protector if you feel like you don't need it, because you get strong cooldown reduction already through some things. If you feel like you don't need Avenging Wrath or Kings up all that often, you can drop this point and move it around. Hand of the Protector is an option. Seal of Charity might be an option. Of course, Inspiring Vanguard, Barricade of Faith are both options. There's just a lot going on in this tree now that make it feel like it's an overall more viable tree, in my opinion. So overall, for now, I'm just going to say we'll just grab the 2 points and like, we'll just grab it here just for the sake of everything. So overall, I think these trees are in a much better place for Prot Paladin. Real quick, let me put on my sword and shield. This is out of date. I've upgraded a few of these items already. And let's just go down real quick and kind of look. The gameplay itself isn't going to change all that often. Let's see. So we're in kind of a generic build. So we'll just come here to the Cleave training dummies. You can see there's a lot of Ret Paladins. Let me fix my audio real quick. Yeah, Ret Paladins have been all over this, of course, because the Ret rework, but we're going to take a look at the Prot Paladin here. So obviously, as always, you're going to lead in with your shield, get your consecration down as much as possible, and then you're going to want to, you know, kind of the rotation doesn't change. You're still spending on cooldown. Real quick, you can see Eye of Tyr. Kind of big damage there that happened on Eye of Tyr. You can see we get, you know, like I said, the actual rotation doesn't change much. We're going to Word of Glory ourselves. See it crit for 78,000 and is healing for 6,000 over time here. You know, 3,000 crits there. So like, you just have really good sustain built into the kit itself. But the tank itself, just from a damage profile, I think feels a lot smoother. I still think you're going to find something for Crusader's Judgment. You may want to skip something like Barricade of Faith, which I think is something that is going to be done a lot. Like I said, I think you could skip both of these talents here and grab something like this, and then grab for Mythic Plus like Bulwark of Righteous Fury, Raid, or even Mythic Plus, you grab Final Stand. I just think there's some options here within this tree that you can really flex with. Overall, as a new Paladin main, someone that has played Prot Paladin quite a bit in the past and is going to be playing a lot moving forward into the future, I feel really good about where this tree is at. Is it perfect? No, I think there's a couple things that still need to be fixed. Things like After Image still really kind of screw with like Divine Purpose. Like, it just doesn't really function all that well. It's kind of weird. Again, I think something like Tyrion's Devotion should be moved over to the class tree. I want to see Punishment changed. I want to see Lightforged Blessing changed to match all the specs. I think Fate's Armor probably needs to be adjusted to WOG instead of Shield of the Righteous. Otherwise, I think it's just kind of a mandatory pick potentially. A lot of smarter Paladins than me will be looking at some different things. And I think there's options, things like, you know, do you need this point here, for example, in Recompense to get Judgment of Light? Maybe, maybe not. You know, but the bottom line is that there's a lot more options in this tree than there were prior to this patch coming out, or as we see on live now, where the builds are pretty cookie cutter. Not really an option to be able to move around any points as you want to see fit, because you're pretty restricted. That has changed for 10.0.7. I'm really looking forward to the fact that we're going to have these more options available. I think Prot Paladin is going to be in a much better place than it is right now. And even now, I think it's in an okay spot. It's pretty above average. There's some really good Prot Paladins out there, really pushing the spec. Last I checked, at least as of MDI weekend, the #1 tank in the world was a Prot Paladin. So the spec's not like dead. It's just that it had some very fundamental flaws that unless you either build a group around to compensate for, or you're just an extremely good player to compensate for, it was going to be kind of tough to kind of get around those fatal flaws. A lot of those have kind of been papered over in a way, and sealed up a little bit. And I think the spec is going to be in a really good place. So if you're a Prot Paladin main or someone that's interested in picking up Prot Paladin, go ahead and start gearing it now. But 10.0.7, I think, is where you're really going to shine. So let me know what you think of Prot Paladin down in the comments below. What do you think about the potential build options that we have, the potential for the spec itself moving into the next patch? So comment, like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Until the next one, guys, I hope you all stay safe. I hope you're enjoying yourself. You have fun. You keep on gaming. And I will see you all in the next video.